This isn't your average research talk. This is GridX. At UMBC, we are driven to pursue public research for the public good. Join us as some of our greatest minds from across the disciplines explore innovative approaches to the most pressing issues in our society today.
Good afternoon, Retrievers. I gotta tell you something. Normally we have to do this twice, but I'm gonna do it one more time because some people are still coming in. Good afternoon, Retrievers. Welcome to homecoming at UMBC, and most certainly welcome to GridX 2025. We started this session, as a good number of you may know, back in 2016 when we celebrated the 50th anniversary of UMBC. And so this is our 8th iteration, because in 2020 we had to sit it out. There was a little pandemic going on, as some of you may remember. So GridX stands for Global Research, Innovation, Trends, and Excellence. I know you all know that because I have been talking about this for the last 9 or 10 years. It is a combination of talks by some of our faculty, and we have an incredible lineup of faculty here with us today. And it is we include also a good number of alumni every year. And you will get to know 2 of our really outstanding alumni this year. These 2 alumni you meet today are only 2 of over 100,000 alumni that we've had at UMBC. Earlier a year ago, we graduated our 100,000th alumnus. And so can we give a little hand to 100,000 Retrievers out there in the country? I don't want to tell you about all the details of the talks because you already have read the agenda and you will really be looking forward to seeing them. But the way that this is set up, we got 3 sets of talks, then we have a short break to change the stage around a little bit, and then come the next group and the next group. And I know that afterwards, you're going to be so hungry and so thirsty that we have a little reception plan next door. It's a reception in the showcase in the building next door. And there we will feature some of the previous alumni from GridX, faculty who have spoken before, and they will show some of the updates from the last time they were here. So you will enjoy these presentations, which provide just a few spotlights into this really rapidly growing research and creative achievement community here at UMBC. I can assure you that you will be surprised and you learn something new this afternoon. And on that, welcome to GridX 25. And in order to kick off our first session, I am going to introduce you to our moderator, Dr. Jean Van Briesen, who is our new Dean of the College of Engineering and Information Technology. Jean, come on out, please. You don't need this.
Good afternoon. We got that done. Great. I'm so thrilled that you're here, and it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Gargi Dasgupta, who is currently serving as the Director of Product Management for IBM Watson Orchestrate. Prior to this position, she served as the Chief AI Officer for IBM Automation and the Director of IBM Research in India. She was at the time also the CTO of India South Asia. Gargi is the recipient of the ACM India Outstanding Contributions by a Woman Researcher in the area of computing in 2021 and was named among the Fortune Top 50 Women in Business. She's a double UMBC alumna who received her MS in Computer Science in 2001 and graduated with her doctoral degree, her PhD with us in Computer Science in 2003. Please join me in welcoming her to the GridX stage.
Hello, Retrievers. So proud to be back here. And I'm Gargi, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why the future is here with agentic AI. And I'm sure all of you have heard about agentic AI. And it is sometimes that we think to ourselves, is this real? Is this certain? Is this on the hype curve? Is it going to go down? From my perspective, a little bit of what happened in the last 4 years has changed the complexion and the era of computing forever. So I think it's good to accept that there's going to be a lot of uncertainty in the agentic era. But what I wanted to talk to you about is how you and us together can help it a little bit be more certain, be more secure, and be more safe. All right? So a couple of years back, we were in this world of models, and we were wowed by ChatGPT. And models could actually generate letters, campaigns, started generating software, and it was wonderful. All right? And while we were just getting used to generative AI models, we got into the world of assistants, right? Assistants were these powerful, contextual, feed-forward LLM systems that would answer questions much better than the traditional chatbots. And that's good because you could now throw your knowledge bases, your curated knowledge of years and years and decades, and get very personalized answers. And customer care was just going to get live and better. But within a year, we are in this era of agents. So what are agents? They are this sophisticated software that are powered to think, act, and observe. And this verb act is where the democratization is happening. If agents can really think, reason, act, then they start to get much more powerful, much closer to what humans can do. They have this TAO loop, think, act, observe loop, which you can further enhance with reflection, self-correction, adaptability, flexibility. But the verb act is the most important one. And it's also the one that's generating a lot of fear. Agents are going to change the world of software. Apps or application, as we know today, are just getting disrupted. And I'm here to talk to you about what this agentic landscape today looks like. And it looks quite chaotic, right? You'll see your favorite software vendors, all the hyperscalers, open source players, your communication channels, if you're on Teams or Slack, WhatsApp, each of them have their own agents. So does SuccessFactors, so does Workday, Salesforce, hyperscalers. The world of apps is going to be replaced by the world of agents. And the work that apps do today is going to be done by a multi-agent orchestration system whose only job is to take software components like agents and stitch your substrate together. This is a fundamental computing paradigm shift. And this is going to change how we engineers, how we researchers, how we scientists look at the next 20 years of technology. It's here to stay. And you'll see a lot of names out there. I want to talk to you about, of course, what we at IBM are doing with watsonx. That's the product I own. But if you replace IBM and watsonx, this is a picture that Google will show you, or Amazon will show you, or any other software vendor. It's really what is at the guts of an agent. Well, an agent is accessible to you by natural language, by voice, maybe in the future by sign language. That's how the channel of engagement works. It has a few intelligent components like memory, reasoning. It has access to tools. And this is where the ecosystem of players is becoming more and more important. Tools are, think of them as your database systems where your records are, your student records are. They could be your sales data, your HR data, your procurement data. It could be CSV files, it could be documents, it could be indexed, DB2 indexes stored over years and years, right? All of them get exposed to the agents through a protocol, MCP. It's a standardized protocol, but it becomes a means for you or the agent to access the data. So the middle box is where we think there's a lot of reasoning, and a lot of research to be done, because the middle block is the intelligence. It's the orchestration or the Uber mechanism of how a Slack agent is going to talk to your CRM data, is going to talk to your ticketing infrastructure and give you an answer that's personalized for you. That's why the channel and knowing who you are is so important. And on the right-hand side is what the ecosystem is going to commoditize. Models, like every week there is a new model on Hugging Face, and they're bigger and better and smarter. The GPT OSS model that does reasoning actually blows off your mind. Models will be commoditized, so will be tools, and so will be access to all these different infrastructures. What is really important is how safe. You're trusting your most critical business processes to be executed by agents. Is the world really ready for this? Can you put controls? Can you put guardrails? Can you, in a frictionless manner, move your enterprise systems to this agentic world? Because if we were born today, it was a click of a button. We'll all do agentic. But we have workflows. We have RPAs. We have the cloud vendors. What happens there? Today, on MasterCard, 80 million transactions are run on IBM systems every day. None of that is agentic. So frictionless way to move your trusted business processes into the agentic world with security is going to be key. All right. So what are we going to do about security and trusting the technology so that we open up our personal data, our HR data, our invoices, our financial data? That's what I'm here to talk to you about. Well, three things. We're going to bring in more observability, so you can observe. You observe, you measure, you optimize. Classical research thinking. A lot of opportunities to optimize the TAO or the thinking loop of agents. So we add observability, we add frictionless transition, and we make the substrate open and interoperable. That's how I'm going to tell you how you bring in trust. So observability has three lenses to it. We're doing a little bit, but I think it's really an open area for research. You observe, you measure, and you optimize. You test and evaluate. You do it with ground truth that you have, or you call out to another powerful model to generate the ground truth on your APIs and on your MCP tools. And these are all screenshots of what's available today. You get into the agent, you can actually see audit trails of exactly where the agent went and what decisions it took. All of this is leading to our trusted observability loop so that you can start to measure, monetize, and optimize. The second thing is about adding guardrails. Till the world is ready to throw everything at an agent, it's okay to put an agent in an agentic workflow, and that starts building trust. You can add post and pre-hook security. It's guardrails. I don't know if you can read it, but you can give it instructions and say, hey, if the customers are angry, please hand it off to a human agent. And those are actually policies that need to be adhered to. And finally, I think you have this thing of opening it up. Agent protocols, agent languages are standardized and interoperable. So the moment you can observe, measure, optimize, you have more control over what the agentic behavior is, and it's open and interoperable. You have a future that's much more predictable. Thank you. On to the next speaker.
Awesome.
Oh, what a start. I hope you're all excited as I am for the next speaker. Dr. Ziv Rosenzweig is a professor in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry here at UMBC. He obtained his bachelor's and his PhD in chemistry from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, And then he spent nearly a decade as the program director of chemistry at the National Science Foundation here in the US. And he joined us at UMBC as a full professor and chair in 2014. And he served here since 2020. He has authored over 100 research papers in leading journals and mentored 25 doctoral students and 10 master's students during his career. His research focuses on developing safer alternatives to toxic nanomaterials for biomedical and environmental applications, including breakthrough work in cancer cell imaging and non-toxic quantum dots. Please join me in welcoming him.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the title of my talk, Tiny Lights, Big Impact, How Luminescent Nanoparticles Revolutionizing Medicine, or Nanomedicine. I'm going to take you into a journey of my scientific career. It started somewhere in the 1990s, where I was working on fiber optic sensors for chemical contaminants. They were beautiful, elegant, but they were large. Something like 0.5 millimeter, so large in the context of working with cells and tissues, biological cells and tissues. So this has coincided with the emergence of nanotechnology as a field, and we move slowly but surely from 0.5 millimeter fiber optic sensors to microparticles. Those are micron-sized particles, 1/1,000,000th of a meter. And then from there to the nanoscale, which is 1/1,000,000th of a meter, about 100 folds smaller than the diameter of a single hair. Okay? It started for me as some sort of an accident. I read a couple of interesting papers in the journal Science, which is the leading scientific journal in the world. Every Friday I was reading this journal. And I read two papers, back-to-back papers by two friends of mine. One of them named Shuming, and the other one named Shimon, back in Emory and UCLA, showing how you can take those colloidal, inorganic nanocrystals named quantum dots that we knew about them from previously, where they work was in organic solvents, not in water. And they showed in those two back-to-back papers that you can actually transfer them to aqua solution, to water solution, or biological solutions, and that got me dancing in the office. I called one of my students and asked her to actually go to the lab and synthesize those particles the way it was described in the papers, and she did. She came back 3 days later with the results, and I was astonished. Her results were better than the ones reported in the paper. So immediately I called all the students and moved the entire lab to quantum dot research, okay? 2 months later, we discovered that her results were a mistake. It was too late to change. This is how I started my career on quantum dots. What are they? A quantum dot is a crystal. It's very small, a few nanometers in diameter. It's so small that it's effectively, we call it a dot, hence the name quantum dot. They are made of semiconductor materials like silicon. We often use cadmium sulfide, or cadmium-containing materials, which is a problem because cadmium is toxic. We'll talk about it later. And there is some feature in this material which called the energy band gap. It's an energy difference between two bands or two energy levels in a material. In a bulk material, it's constant. So if you take cadmium sulfide material and shine UV light on it, you will get some yellow, faint yellow emission, not much. But when you go down to the nanoscale, something magic happens. This band gap of energy difference between the energy levels is actually changing. As you decrease the particle size, it gets bigger. So the color of the material, the color of light emitted from the material is changing as well. The material doesn't change, just the size of the material changes. It moved from 1 nanometer to 10 nanometer. That's all, very small change. But that actually results in a tremendous spectrum of colors. And we decided to actually making them and use them in various applications. And today I'm going to talk mostly about nanomedicine because of the interest of the crowd. But there are other applications. You can see here the first demonstration of using quantum dots in cellular imaging on the lower left side. Only 2 types of quantum dots here with 2 different colors, but we showed over the years that we can actually tag cells with 6 or 8 colors of quantum dots for 8 different markers. Now, this is not a simple particle. I can present it as simple, but it's not. Actually, in addition to the core materials, there's a passivating shell, and in addition to the passivating shell, there is a protective coating, sometimes a polymer coating, and there are many molecules like antibodies that can recognize specific cells, or drug molecules that can actually treat tumors effectively, locally, in a targeted way. And all of it requires very controlled, precise, elegant chemistry. And this is where the lab is busy with the work of many dedicated students that are actually perfecting the structure, the architecture of these nano platforms. So one example of this technology that you all have either in your hand or in your pocket is a cell phone. The cell phone display is actually contain nanomaterials like quantum dots. In the early day of light emitting displays, we use what we call LCD, liquid crystal displays. And in there, you see there was a white light source, and each pixel on the chip was coated with 3 different colored filters, which was a difficult process to do. Okay? And also there was a lot of noise and it wasn't clear. In the quantum dots screens, what you have is a blue light source and a mixture of red emitting and green emitting quantum dots to generate 3 different colors, blue, green, and red. The result of this is something like that, a display that will have billions of pixels with distinct, pure, different colors. And you can see the difference in how fall colors this time of the year look like in the conventional television on the left and in a Samsung QLED or quantum dots television on the right. The difference is very clear in the color and also the visualization. So now we take it to medicine and we use it to visualize cells. So on the left, you see a single cell decorated with those red emitting quantum dots. Impressive, but less important. On the right, you actually see results of 3 biopsies of breast cancer tissue. Okay? And you can see that each column here will have 5 different markers, specific markers. Each of them is tagged by a different quantum dot. And you see a difference, a clear difference between biopsy 1, biopsy 2, and biopsy 3. That allows clinicians to design individualized, targeted treatment for breast cancer in contrast to what it was used before. Everyone would get the same treatment. Okay? That minimizes side effects and increases dramatically the prognostic outcomes. Okay? So when you move, it's not only working in culture or pathology culture, it works in whole animals as well. We can actually embed or target those quantum dots to tumors in a whole animal, and you can see them with your naked eye. So it's not something that is requiring sophisticated equipment or something like that. Okay, so in addition to imaging, we can use those quantum dots as a form of treatment. In one treatment for cancer is named photodynamic therapy. In photodynamic therapy, the goal is to produce reactive oxygen species that, like you see those oxygen or O2 species there, that will attack tumor cells and kill them, basically. And it seems that quantum dots are doing it very effectively, as you can see on the upper right. That's a lot less painful than surgery, a lot less painful than showering yourself with liquid nitrogen, as it's often done in dermatology clinics. Okay, so none of this is possible without hard work, and there's more to do. We need to, it's an ongoing work. We need to design better particles. We need to develop detection platforms to visualize them better, and we have to make them less painful and more targeted therapies, and alleviate this dogging issues of nanoparticle toxicity that is still a remaining very difficult challenge. So a lot of people were involved in this work, my students, current students, and former students, overall 25 PhDs over the years and counting, 10 master degrees, 10 postdoctoral fellows, dozens of collaborators in the US and around the world in 4 different continents. Lots of work, funding agencies that supported this work. And I don't want to forget, as a last minute, some things that we often forget, that all of this work cannot be done without the infrastructure that we have here at the university. And the infrastructure is not only equipment and buildings, it's people. The labs don't clean themselves. The water doesn't flow without maintenance. There's no electricity if someone doesn't care of it. And honestly, in a chemistry building, we need to keep this chemistry building very safe, because if not for this environmental safety people that come and inspect us and make sure that the building is safe, this building could have caught fire right now and even blow up. So we have to remember them and thank them from the bottom of my heart. Thank you very much, guys.
Okay, the amazing topics continue. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Amy Freud, who's a professor of history and serves as the director of UMBC's Drescher Center for the Humanities. She specializes in the social, economic, and women's history of Britain from 1500 to 1750. Freud is the author of several notable works: Silent Partners, Women as Public Investors During Britain's Financial Revolution, 1690 to 1750, and Never Married, Single Women in Early Modern England. She is currently working on a project about financial scandal and corporate fraud in the early years of the London stock market. Freud is currently the UMBC Presidential Teaching Professor, 2024 to 27, and was the founding director of UMBC's minor in entrepreneurship. Please join me in welcoming her.
Hello, everyone. I'm Amy Freud, and I am a professor of history who specializes in the origins of early capitalism and in the involvement of women in financial history. So I'm going to tell you a little bit today about my work in those 2 areas. I think I need to go one ahead. So the origins of capitalism can be traced to a few back alleys of 18th century London. This area was known as Exchange Alley, and it was the home to coffee shops where people would buy and sell stocks and shares in publicly traded companies. This is part of what we British historians call the Financial Revolution. This is an era where a new Bank of England is established, a national debt is created, and people begin to be able to openly buy and sell stocks and shares in companies. Some companies, like the East India Company and the South Sea Company, are what we would today call blue chip investments, big, important investments. I'm actually interested in the little guys, so I'm looking at a different company, one that's not been well studied, called the Charitable Corporation. The Charitable Corporation was established in 1707, and it was set up to extend small loans to working people, so it extended credit to the poor. It was established by a number of philanthropic people that were associated with the Church of England, the state church. But what is interesting about the company is that it was very involved from the start with women. So on its seal here, you can see that Queen Anne is sitting on the throne there, and she is the royal patron of the Charitable Corporation. When in the 18th century, if you wanted to butter up the monarch, you put their name on a medal. And so you see here that women are involved from the very beginning, not only Queen Anne, but in this company, 4 out of the first 31, I guess we would say, corporate directors were women. And I have not found any other 18th century companies where women made up a corporate board. So that is somewhat different, and I think has to do with the philanthropic nature of the company. So the company was set up in many ways to be what on the continent in Catholic Europe was called a mont, or a mont de piété. These were monts that were established by the Catholic Church to give out money at no interest to poor people who may need it to engage in trade. In Britain, Britain's a Protestant country in the 18th century, they decide to do something slightly different. So they decide to turn this into a for-profit business venture. Instead of being, you could say, supported by the church, instead it's private individuals who invest money in the charitable corporation. And they don't do this for entirely philanthropic purposes. It's not a nonprofit. They actually earn money on their investment. So we could think of it as like a social choice investment. Today, you still earn a rate of return. In the 18th century, the rate of return was pretty good for the charitable corporation, 10% returns each year, which you will learn is pretty good in a portfolio. This is the charter of the charitable corporation, and it also includes women as founding members. As I said, some of those women were elite. One was a baroness, one was the widow of a knight. Others were of uncertain social status. So it shows us that people are investing from all different ranks of society. The other thing about the charitable corporation is that even though it was set up to give small loans to working or small-scale entrepreneurs, I have not found any women that received loans. So women were not able to borrow money from the charitable corporation. But they were able to invest money. And in fact, the company seems to have really encouraged women investors. So you can see here that it encourages, in a lot of ways, investment by people from all different parts of London, and that investment is going to ensure the company does well. The people who are receiving the microloans from the corporation, we can learn a little bit about them from advertisements in 18th century newspapers. And we see here that most people that were receiving loans were pledging property on security to secure those loans. Today, we might call that a pawnbroker. And that's in some ways what the charitable corporation was, a corporate pawnbroker set up to extend credit to the poor, who would then pledge things like textiles, jewelry, maybe even their dishes made of precious metals. So that's how people were able to secure those loans. And in return, we are going to see that the people who invest in the company are going to do quite well. I did some sleuthing, and I used what are called subscriber lists that are also published in the 18th century. And what you notice is that there are a number of names of men, but also women who invested in the corporation. So from these corporation lists, I extract the data, and I was able to determine that about 30% of investors in the charitable corporation were women. This is a pretty high rate of female participation in the 18th century stock market. In fact, I think it's amongst the highest rates that we're going to see. The only thing that I see women participating in at a higher rate are investing in government bonds. So something about the charitable corporation was a little bit different. Unfortunately, charitable corporation does not get to be known for its philanthropy, for its usefulness, for its ability to extend credit to the poor. Instead, it becomes known for fraud. In the 1720s, something happened in the charitable corporation. The directors diverged from the original plan. They began to extend larger loans. They used the company like their own piggy bank, and they began to help out friends. Most importantly, they diverted funds to other companies on which they sat on company boards. And so what they did was engage in fraud that is very similar to what occurred recently when Samuel Bankman-Fried, who you may have heard of, took money from one corporation to give to another and to prop up his cryptocurrency company, FTX. He's currently serving a number of years in an institution for that fraud. In the 18th century, the directors are similarly maligned, and you can see here the words that are used for the directors in the press, but they don't necessarily get as much, I guess we would say, punishment as Samuel Bankman-Fried did. The other problem for the charitable corporation was its officers. The officers were also engaging in fraud. In fact, we call this a multi-level fraud. And the most famous was John Thompson. John Thompson was the warehouse keeper who was in charge of the pledged goods. He realized that the jig was up. He hid the account books and he fled to the continent of Europe. And so rumors began to circulate that things were not so good with the company. When they began to open up the books, they found that money was gone, pledges were gone, and John Thompson was gone. So the British Intelligence Service put out what we would call an all-points bulletin, and John Thompson was tracked across the European continent. He was, in this document, you can see on the left, he was described for us so that we have a description of what he would look like if someone was searching for him in the 18th century. Thompson ended up first in France, not surprisingly. That's where you get to pretty quickly from England, but ended up going to Rome. And that's when people got really concerned back home in England, because Rome was not only the home of the Catholic pontiff, but it was the home of the Jacobites, the Stuarts that had been thrown off the English throne in 1688. They were always plotting to get back on the English throne, and John Thompson meeting up with them was very concerning, and people began to believe that the charitable corporation was a treasonous plot. I think it was. In England, the shareholders also began to object about what was happening. They petitioned Parliament, and they asked Parliament for a bailout. They wanted their money back. Parliament was somewhat sympathetic and actually tried to help them out with a lottery, and that in this lottery they would receive some of their money back. It seems that actually the corporation's directors were very well connected politically, and so Sir Robert Walpole, the Prime Minister, was able to save them from any long-term consequences for their corporate malfeasance and fraud. And here's a picture of Walpole as a sunflower who's looking over the people of Britain, especially his very well-connected friends in the charitable corporation. As I said, the response to the charitable corporation fraud was a lottery that paid back investors some of their funds. But in the end, the charitable corporation was a very risky investment for its shareholders. Parliament did not initiate any long-term regulation that would stop a similar corporate fraud from happening again, and instead used the charitable corporation as a cautionary tale, sees it as an aberration. So my research shows a long history of lack of regulation in the market. Thank you.
So can we give one more quick applause to those initial three speakers? We will take about 4 or 5 minute break to change some things around here, and then we start with the second round. Okay? Again, welcome to GridX. So we're jumping right into session number 2. That should all work out. And it is my job to introduce our second moderator. That's John Stoller McAllister, who is our interim dean of the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. With that, John.
Nice. That was a good trick from Carl. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second round. Our first speaker is Felipe Millan, who has worked in government for 13 years, most recently as Disability Program Manager. Felipe was also a telephone counselor for a local mental health hotline and a National Suicide Prevention Lifeline 988 for over 12 years. In 2023, Felipe was a speaker for the 35th Annual Suicide Prevention Conference organized by the Maryland Department of Health, Office of Suicide Prevention. Felipe obtained his BA in Political Science from the College of Worcester and his MPP degree from UMBC. Everyone, please welcome Felipe.
Hello, everyone. Thanks. It's such a pleasure to be up here and with such an amazing group of presenters. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this paradox that I've come to think a lot about over the past few years when it comes to disability, on going from special to suspect. And I have to say that the things that I'll share tonight are really kind of my own perspectives and my own thoughts on things. So when I was about 8 years old, I went jumping into the kitchen where my mother was, and I said, I know why I was born with a disability, which is spina bifida for me. And I said, spina bifida is like my shadow. Sometimes it's way bigger than me. I feel like I could fall into it and I would just disappear. And other times, like my shadow, it is so small I could just step on it and it would disappear and I don't even think about it. But I think I have spina bifida as a shadow, and it's so that I can also listen to the shadows of other people. And then I went jumping out of the kitchen. I was 8 years old, and my mother was looking at me like, what happened to this kid? As I grew older, especially around the college years, I did a translation of an article from a medical anthropologist who was studying convulsive disorders in the towns around my hometown in San Cristobal de las Casas in Mexico, southeast Mexico. And what he was finding was that when folks experienced these convulsive episodes, the townsfolk around them would say, this is because you have been touched by God and you are now a healer. And this kind of happened whether folks wanted it to happen or not. And folks would say, you know, actually, if you don't accept this gift, you're going to get worse, you're going to die. And so I thought about that, and I thought about, at the same time, when they were not able to heal someone who came to them, they could be accused of jealousy or of witchcraft. They could be physically harmed, or they could be exiled from the little town where they lived. And so I kept thinking about how quickly we go from thinking of folks with disabilities as being special and then all of a sudden suspect. And this was something that I've seen a lot in the movies, right? We have no shortage of villains who have some physical disability that either they come by because they have been defeated or because their physical disability is somehow a manifestation of some moral rot. So I thought about this first in kind of a very theoretical sense, and it was interesting to have worked on the translation of this article. And then coming to the US when I moved finally in about 2007 permanently, I kept having these episodes where I'd be walking from a restaurant with colleagues, and all of a sudden a person drove up right next to me, got out of the car, didn't say anything to me, but put their hands on my head and started praying for my back and my knees, and then got back into their car and drove away. And so on the one hand, there was that. And then I would run into folks who would say, wow, you're smiling even though you're walking funny and wrong. Clearly, something special is for you, or you are the manifestation of some greater plan. And so again, I kind of caught myself between, well, am I special or am I suspect? I started to wrestle with this on a very sort of personal level. And it wasn't just a personal level. I keep thinking about, in the 13 years I've been in government, about the importance of things like the Americans with Disabilities Act, which we are in the sort of 35th anniversary of commemorating, and how much this was kind of a momentous piece of legislation worldwide. And yet how 35 years later, we still run into places that are not accessible for folks with disabilities. I can't tell you the number of coffee shops and places where I go in where clearly there's been a lot of work put in to make it very nice looking, very elegant, but there's no button to automatically open or close a door, right? And the look of sheer embarrassment I get from certain staff when someone has to tell me that the restroom is down 2 flights of stairs and there's no elevator is something that I have also kind of thought about in terms of how we think about our policies. And then even on the international stage, one of the things that I was struck by when I was reading through the speeches around the ADA is how much this was kind of a model so that other countries could adapt their own disability frameworks and their own disability legislation. What was interesting, however, was in 2012, I got to go to the United Nations for a conference to countries that had signed on to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which had come around in 2006, 2007. And what was interesting is so many countries were saying, this is based on the Americans with Disabilities Act. Will the United States ever ratify it? And to this day, we have not. There's still kind of a debate about, on the one hand, we are kind of special for having had this initial piece of legislation, and very quickly it kind of went into kind of suspect on how we think about international treaties and frameworks. I think I've been very surprised in terms of how quickly that transition can go from one to the other. And I think COVID was an interesting example of so many of the signs that went up initially about protecting individuals with disabilities, about kind of doing the things that we needed to do to protect folks. And at the same time, how, as time went on, folks with disabilities grew concerned that a lot of medical biases, a lot of things were actually kind of kicking into place where some folks were even saying, well, what kind of quality of life could you possibly have as someone with a disability, right? Maybe this is a good thing that this might happen to you. And I think going through this whiplash definitely has kind of this mental health toll, right? Of being at the same time feeling like a hero for navigating spaces that are not designed for persons with disabilities, while at the same time being angry at kind of the help that I often require to navigate these spaces. This idea of a very sort of warlike language that we have around disability, it always feels like we're fighting a war against one disability or battling another one. And I don't know that there's a lot of room for compassion in that sometimes when we just kind of narrow it down to these very sort of conflicting language. And I think in the end, also just caught between these structures that help and then these structures that kind of impede who I get to be out kind of in the world, right? And is there something that I'm doing wrong? Or is there something that I just kind of can't overcome? So I think in a way, there's a way to start to interrupt that paradox, which is, I think there is a line between awareness and advocacy, and maybe activism as well, that kind of goes through this. One of the things that I've been proud to start doing is working on a commentary that I hope will be published soon by the Journal of Pediatric Rehabilitation, which looks at how conditions like spina bifida often have very integrated multi-specialty care in childhood, and then once you reach a certain age in adulthood, you're kind of on your own and you're trying to cobble together different medical care from different providers and different specialties that are often kind of not designed for you. So I think from wherever you are, whether that it is in that awareness, that advocacy, or that activism space, I certainly appreciate kind of all and everything that any of you can do from there. And so I really kind of leave you with these questions about how do you see this paradox play out in your own interactions, and how we think about people either doing something either because of their disability or in spite of that disability, and that tension of assumptions when it comes to how we think about that. And then how do we empower individuals with disabilities, maybe including folks here as well, while addressing these kind of systemic and societal barriers that still exist. I think that's something that I think about in the passage of the ADA. There's some very specific language about we have to dismantle these barriers that are both physical and attitudinal when it comes to individuals with disabilities. So thank you so much for your time, your patience, and your listening.
Thank you, Felipe. That's an amazing talk. Our next speaker / performer is Shaness D. Kemp, is a native of Nassau, Bahamas, is an associate professor of dance who continues to work as a freelance artist, choreographer, and dance educator. As a master teacher of Mfandi technique and an established choreographer, she has showcased work and taught at various institutions, festivals, and intensives, both nationally and internationally. Her work is rooted in advocacy, and she is inspired by the individuals that journey through each creative process and work with her. Please welcome Shaness.
Everyone. Firstly, I'd like to introduce my beautiful collaborators. This is India Blake, and this is Victoria Davies, both of whom are alumni of the UMBC Dance Department. So this talk is going to be interactive, so feel free to shout out, blurt out any responses that you may have to the questions that I ask. Yes? All right, great. As a choreographer, I create space for my audience to embark on a journey that I've carefully curated for them. And as a narrative-based choreographer, I do so by paying particular attention to the how and the why. Whether literal translations or abstractions of my choreographic intent, the decisions that I make directly inform the way in which my work is perceived, and received, right? And so I utilize the choreographic tools of choice, silence, and rhythm in my creative process to deepen my embodied and choreographic investigation. I also lean into familiarity to assist with this, particularly when the subject matter is a difficult one. So today I'm gonna lean into a little bit of Whitney Houston to help me and help me show you what that may look like, yes? Is that all right? Yes. All right, can you play the track for me, please? Come on now, who don't like some Whitney Houston, right? So based on what these young artists just did, what would you say that this work is about? What did you see? What did you hear? What did you feel? What did you experience? Strong women. Confidence. Joy. Energy. Okay. Breath. Okay. Sorry, what did you say? Growth. Okay. So what if I remove the familiar sounds of Whitney Houston and I introduce silence? I keep the rhythmical structure the same, but I also offer choice to the dancers. What would shift? What about now? What is that about? Defiance. Power. Attitude. And walk off. What about now? What did you see? What did you hear? What did you feel? What did you experience? Struggle. Sorry, a little louder. Pain. Pain. Child, I can't hear up here. Pain. Okay. Fear. Tension. Sorrow. I heard the rhythm of her feet. Rhythm. Interesting. So the rhythmical structure, the choreographic intent, and Yeah, the choreographic intent, the rhythmical structure has remained the same, and the foundational movement. The foundational movement remained the same, but there was different perceptions of what the work was about at each phase, right? So as the choreographer, that kind of nudges me a little bit to let me know that perhaps I need to lean in with more specificity to this idea of choice. And in this instance, because I know what the choreographic intention is, and I want to bring you closer to that, perhaps I may need to switch the music. Select something that pulls you closer to what I would like you to experience. As a choreographer, a narrative-based choreographer, a Black narrative-based choreographer, a Black Caribbean narrative-based choreographer, I am committed to telling the stories of the known and the unknown. I pay homage to Black people in America and the diaspora by creating work that speaks to their resilience, that celebrates their brilliance, and honors their existence. And this is a snippet of a larger work that did just that unapologetically. So here are the facts. Music, please.
You so black? Ooh, you so black. When you smile, the stars come out. You so black when you born, the God come out. Black as night. Black as dirt. Black as a boot. Black as a hearse. Black to the earth. Black at last and black at first. Black unrehearsed. Black uninvested. Black uninvited. Black ill-requested. Black interested. Black entertained. Black in something special, baby. Black just the same. Black like your mamas and black like your daddies. Black like you want me and black like you could never have. Black and inconvenient. Black with the burden of proof. Black until proven innocent. Black with the built-in truth. Black and blue. Black and substance abuse. Black with the life that matters. Black with hands up. Don't shoot. Black with lead in my water. Black in a subpar school. Black and pipeline to prison. Black single mothers with children. Black and caught up in the system. Black and tired of the division of being black and broke. Black and poor. Black and bleeding. Black before black was needing social media. Black as bland. Back to Africa and black again. Black as Panthers, black as Angela and Asada, black as Betty and Coretta's sons and daughters, black as pyramids, black as mathematics, black as melanized, black as magic, black as televised, black is in need of drastic black advancement, black enhances, black with chances, black with privilege, black with pride, black on purpose, on the black hand side, black and beautiful, black and blessed, and highly favored, black and blessed, black and so much more, black and nothing less, black and educated, black and dangerous. You know, blacks with education is the most dangerous. Black is love, black makes babies, black babies grow up, black is so tough, black is so hard to do, black is me, black is you, black is not something you choose. Black is something you cherish. Black is something you wear and you rock it with honor. I'm black like my granddaddy and my great-great-great-great-grandmama. Black is lift every voice and sing. Black is letting our freedom ring and resound. Black is color, adjective, adverb, and
noun. Thank you for listening.
Wow, that was unbelievable. Can we have another round of applause for them? All right, our last presenter, who I don't believe is going to be dancing, is Dr. Fouad Hamidi. He's an associate professor of the Information Systems Department and part of the Human-Centered Computer Program. He is the director and designing participatory future lab and Interactive Systems Research Center. He has a PhD in computer science from York University in Toronto, Canada. His research focuses on developing participatory approaches to include non-expert participants in interactive technology design. To date, his work has been supported by 6 NSF grants and has significant positive societal impacts, including providing free assistive technologies to more than 300 disabled Maryland residents and technology-rich after-school learning experiences to hundreds of youth in Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and beyond. Please welcome Dr. Hamidi.
Hi, everyone. When I was working on my PhD dissertation, I dreamed of a computer that was alive. Instead of visualizing or processing data, it was actually eating it and turning it into a material that was edible by its users. I didn't come up with this idea out of the blue. I was working with children with autism to create a learning game for them that they would play together. But if anybody has designed anything for children, it's very difficult to satisfy them. They were becoming very bored with whatever I was creating. So I was frustrated. But I noticed that a lot of them were interested in caring for pets or other living beings. Instead of dismissing the dream, I created Rafiq, a system that combines a colony of living mushrooms, mushroom colony, with an embedded network irrigation system. The way that Rafiq works is that it monitors learning games, and when children use them, it waters itself. So it grows larger and faster. In turn, this motivates the children to use more games, creating a positive feedback loop. When I placed Rafiq in children's homes, to evaluate it, I noticed that in addition to increasing application use or game use, it also leads to conversations between children and their parents and visitors to the home that span many creative and unexamined connections ideas. So lots of areas. So for example, they were talking about relationships, about life, about mushrooms, a lot of topics. And this type of transdisciplinary thinking is what I aim to explore in my research. So I was doing this in the context of the home, so in a private setting. So when I came to UMBC, I wanted to explore it in a public setting. So what it would look like if we support this type of thinking in a public setting. And I initiated a project called Infinite Transformation, where I was asking the question of how can we create a poem that instead of reading or reciting, people can drink. I started with a line of 16th century poetry, 14th century poetry by Hafiz of Shiraz, a Persian poet. I'm originally from Iran, I'm kind of obsessed with poetry, which is about love and transformation. I'll do a quick recitation. هرگز نمیرد آن که دلش زنده شد به عشق. ثبت است بر جریده عالم دوام ما. I took the poem, I then mapped it to Morse code, so zeros and ones, and then I mapped it to the 4 letters that make up DNA, CGTA. I added additional code to make this poetic DNA fragment viable. And then I used a synthetic biology process, similar to CRISPR, to insert it into the genome of living yeast cells. So I had poetic yeast cells. Once I had this yeast cells, I used it to brew wine. So this bottle of wine is infused with the poetry that I started with. This is also a complex object because creating and consuming alcohol is forbidden in Islamic tradition, where Sufi poetry is situated in. However, a lot of poets use wine as a metaphor for a dangerous but desired transformation. Now, I had a bit of a challenge because it's impossible or very difficult to see yeast cells with the naked eye. So how can I communicate the idea of this project to audience members? So I worked with my colleague, Dr. Tajid de Carvalho, to create microscopic images of the poetic yeast cells. And then in collaboration with Linda Dussman, Lee Booth, Alan Wonneberger, and Ryan Zuber, and the UMBC's Imaging Research Center, we created an installation that combined animation, video, audio, and music to create a meditative space where audience members could experience the project. I have a video. Okay. When we exhibited this work at sites in Baltimore and beyond, we saw that it in a collaboration, including in a collaboration with Carol Hess from dance, we saw that it attracted people with a lot of different interests. In addition, we saw in audience feedback and questions and so on and responses that people were thinking about a lot of topics and creative ideas that went beyond art, science, and technology. Again, kind of touching on that transdisciplinarity that I was talking about. More importantly, it created an opportunity for community engagement at the level of culture. And this helps us reflect on where we are and where we are going. And it's an important practice for universities to continue to do, lest we are left behind in a cultural discourse that's leaving us by. Enabling this type of imagination, creativity, and self-reflection is what continues to motivate my work and my students in my lab, and what I'm continuing to explore in several different projects. For example, in an NSF-funded project led by Dr. Justice Walker and in collaboration with Baltimore Underground Science Space and La Nube Children's Museum, we're exploring how to create participatory processes where children and youth can create their own projects with living organisms. And as you can imagine, the kids are very creative. They're coming up with great ideas, including a microbial painting kit for other kids, and a board game that's made of mycelium, complete with a mycelium dice. This is what they created. In another project with the Digital Harbor Foundation and multiple other collaborators, we're looking to see how to create maker spaces and maker activities that enable people with youth and young adults with disabilities, especially autism and other conditions, to create their own technology-rich projects and be creative. Some examples of that include 3D printed assistive technologies, like this device that I have, which is a holder for a utensil, and we're kind of looking to see what's the impact of that on the participating youth. What unites all of these projects is a quest for inclusive and participatory approaches that can make these type of projects possible for community members, for non-experts, and also foster creativity, imagination, and dare I say, collective dreaming. These are skills that are very important in this rapidly changing time of ours to address complex and multifaceted problems. Of course, none of this work would be at all possible without the hard work of my collaborators and the many hardworking students and talented students that are working in my lab. Okay, thank you very much.
So we're going to take another 5-6 minute break to change some things around. But can we get another round of applause for that whole session? All I can say is this is UMBC, right? So before we actually get started with session 3, I wanted to take a 2-minute break for something completely different. I wanted to ask Aaron Misenic, the Executive Director of BW Tech, to join me out here. If you can come out already, Aaron. BW Tech, as many of you know, is our commercialization partner across the street, so to speak. We do a lot of work together between the research community and BW Tech. But especially for today, Aaron and BW Tech are one of our sponsors for the showcase and for the reception. Remember I talked about food and drink and all the other good things? You know, it wouldn't be possible without a little support from Aaron and his team. So with that, oh, there's your picture. And with that, I want to hand it over to you for a couple of minutes.
Thank you. I feel, hey everyone. You know, I'm up here and all I could think of is I'm pretty much the least interesting person I think that's been a part of this group. I want to thank Carl and congratulations on another great event. This is just fantastic. I'm Aaron Misenic. I'm the Executive Director of BW Tech Research Park. a part of UMBC, we are the oldest research park here in Maryland. The whole idea is to focus on UMBC and its technologies. It all starts with Carl and his research group. The idea is that we provide resources to the researchers to help them move their technologies forward as it relates to commercialization and other ideas. We bring together these researchers and students with experienced entrepreneurs, with alumni, everyone we can bring together to really form a great community that, again, enhances the research that's being done here. We have a number of different signature programs. These programs help everything from pre-startups all the way through to growing companies. A lot of them bring together these groups in teams to learn from one another. We bring in outside groups to help really train these groups and really help them understand the whole commercialization process and help them avoid mistakes, at the same time collaborate. We engage each other. It works out great. These are programs that have we've worked with hundreds of researchers over the years. It's just been magnificent, some of the work that we've been doing. A couple of signature events that we have coming up in the coming weeks are really outstanding success stories for us. The first one is a program that's going to be here this month on the 29th that really helps researchers and other community leaders get to know the Department of Defense and its programs that it has to help entrepreneurs to grow to the next level. We're going to have every part of the DoD there to really help the community understand what it takes to get capital and other resources from the DoD. SBIRs, STTRs are just magnificent programs that really can enhance everybody. The other program I have up there is part of our Maryland New Venture program. This has been one of our outstanding success stories. We've had over 125 different researchers participate. We bring together those researchers with the students, with experienced mentors, in teams that go through a multi-week process, learning all along the way the whole idea of commercializing technologies, and the whole thing culminates at the end with a pitch competition with the students leading the pitch competition, and it's a judge competition with a cash award at the end. It really is fantastic. That's a program that's being held in the spring. You can register for it now. I really encourage you to be a part of it. It really is something else. So anyway, that's my piece. Carl, I think you're going to sing. You're going to sing. You're not dancing. The carpet's down. So thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I got to shake you.
This is what we call our commercial break. Listen, an evening or an afternoon like this does not happen by just having a few speakers on stage, and which I am so amazed by every one of our speakers, but there's literally dozens of individuals behind the scenes. And I just want to ask you to give a quick shout out to the AV team and the events management team that make this all look effortless. And with that, we're back to our regularly scheduled program called GridX. And it's my honor to introduce our third moderator. And those of you who haven't been here before, there's sort of a rhythm here. So our third dean is Dean Bill LaCourse, who doesn't need an introduction at this stage, but he is the dean of our College of Natural and Mathematical Sciences.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow, a stage and a microphone. You may never get me off. So, and I will do something a little different. You get some privilege for being last. I read the titles when they came to me, and it was really interesting about looking at disasters. And I've been really blessed. I've never been in a disaster or something that leads to the level of what you see. I've entertained a lot because I've watched a lot of natural disaster movies out there. I've seen tsunamis and The Impossible, tornadoes with Twister, Climate, The Day After Tomorrow, and volcanoes with Dante's Peak. And I must admit, just recently I watched San Andreas with Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, about a massive earthquake that destroys LA and San Francisco. But you know something? We're going to hear from someone tonight that knows what disasters are really about. The truth is natural disasters are terrifying. And although the movies focus on the event, the post-disaster recovery is often long, difficult, and heartbreaking for so many people. So I'm always, thinking about it, we're grateful for those first responders, those who trained them, and those who research how to make post-disaster recovery more efficient and effective. So it is indeed my pleasure to introduce Dr. Lauren Clay. She's a disaster scientist and public health researcher. She's a professor and chair of the Department of Emergency and Disaster Health Systems at University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Her research focuses on health impacts of disasters. Her expertise is in disaster food and nutrition insecurity. In 2021, she was awarded an NSF Career and NSF Convergence Accelerator Awards focused on food system resilience to disasters. She was the inaugural Climate and Health Scholar with NIMHD. She has a PhD in Disaster Science and Management from University of Delaware and a Master of Public Health from Drexel University. Her talk will be Disaster Strikes, Hunger Spikes, Improving Post-Disaster Food Security.
Hi, I'm Lauren. Thanks for the introduction. And today I want to talk to you about food security after disasters. Oop, there we go. That was my first slide. So currently, up to 20% of households in the U.S. experience food insecurity in a given year. Do you know how much this increases after disasters for our coastal communities? Any guesses? It doubles. I heard doubles. It doubles for those most impacted, and that can persist for several years. Household food insecurity is already a complex issue that can be compounded in disasters. So think back to your experiences when COVID-19 first started affecting us. I'm sure you remember there was a lot of uncertainty. You might have been concerned about going to the grocery store. When you got there, the shelves might have been a little empty. This is not that different from what you experience in a hurricane or other type of event. I'm going to talk to you today mostly about hurricanes. So after a hurricane, food is not accessible if a household's vehicle is damaged or if roads are closed. Food is not available if stores are closed or if the shelves are empty. For households with storm expenses, food may not be affordable. Think if you have to evacuate or make repairs to your home. And food is not acceptable if it doesn't meet your cultural or dietary needs, or if there's no working kitchen in which to prepare your food. Overcoming these barriers requires efforts throughout the disaster management cycle. During planning, activities such as upgrading roads or buildings to withstand high winds or floods are happening in the years and months leading up to a disaster. Response activities such as distributing emergency meals are happening in the days and weeks after a disaster. And recovery activities such as getting people back into stable housing where they have kitchens, it happens in the months and years after a disaster. The challenge is government agencies, disaster response organizations have limited resources and they can't afford to do everything. So in order to allocate limited resources in the best way possible, they need to know where disaster food insecurity is highest and what actions will be most effective at addressing it. So my team asked, what if we could predict post-disaster food insecurity just like we predict storms? Could we then plan and respond more effectively to reduce the suffering of households affected by these devastating events? So with the support of the National Science Foundation, we developed Food Forecast. We used human-centered design, and we engaged with partners in North Carolina who had been affected by Hurricanes Matthew in 2016 and Hurricane Florence in 2018. We did a series of interviews and had some workshops with these community partners, and we mapped out how does the food environment get disrupted after a hurricane. From those interviews and workshops, we identified 3 pain points, or had 3 lessons. First, we heard that timely information about where those most vulnerable are located was essential, and it's not available. In the US, we measure food insecurity, we measure it at the household level. We don't really have a measure about what's happening at the community level where response is planned. Second, knowing where food needs are located is not enough. Organizations also need help making decisions about how and when to intervene. Finally, what we heard again and again from our partners is, please don't give us another tool, give us the tool. They need a single location where data can be integrated from across multiple locations because Time is sensitive after a disaster, people are suffering, and so decisions need to be made quickly. Answering where disaster food security risk is highest is challenging. So current approaches are not disaster specific, and they do not consider how food system components interact with each other. So we set out to address that, and we created this new systems dynamics model. This was co-developed with our community partners, taking all the Post-its that we generated at those workshops. I'm going to step through just a few elements of the model. The key output is the meal gap. This is the difference between the number of meals needed in a community and the number of meals available for a span of time after a disaster. Data inputs into the model are tailored to the community. You might have things like the number of households and hazard risk information. The model can then be perturbed with storm characteristics such as hurricane intensity, and then you can project immediate and long-term food security impacts. Using the community food system model, Food Forecast includes 3 tools. 1, a simulation testbed for planning. 2, an interactive map for response. And 3rd, a scorecard for recovery. With these tools, you can predict post-disaster food security and support communities with responding to the needs. It can be useful for a wide variety of organizations, so your federal agencies like the Federal Emergency Management Agency and the United States Department of Agriculture, who are mandated to respond, as well as your local grocery stores, community-based organizations that are meeting food needs in everyday times. As we step through each tool, I'm going to try to illustrate with the county emergency manager as the example. Every county in the US has an emergency manager, and they coordinate any response to disasters. The simulation testbed in Food Forecast is intended for use during planning. It provides insights for how and when to intervene in places where there's a projected meal gap visualized on the map. You can simulate different interventions, such as restoring roads or power more quickly. A county emergency manager can compare the meal gap across neighborhoods and then test for different scenarios, like if we invest more money in food stockpiles or if we invest resources in evacuating more people sooner, how does that affect our food security? The interactive map in Food Forecast supports response operations. The map is preloaded with harmonized data. Here, the green shading shows the meal gap for communities, with the darker green indicating a greater gap between the need and availability. The food stores layer displays where food can be obtained, and you can actually filter by food source type, so food pantry, full-service grocery store. Users can edit the map by adding food stockpile or distribution points established during a response operation. And then a key layer models flood risk for area roadways. The flood model is innovative because it combines flooding from storm surge from the ocean, with rising river levels and precipitation. These kinds of flood estimates are hard for computers to generate, so they're not available when a storm is approaching. So what we've done is use historical data on flooding, roads that have flooded in the past, and simulations for a range of storm tracks to identify those roadways most at risk. A county emergency manager could use this information to determine where to stockpile emergency food to make sure that populations won't be cut off when roads flood. Finally, the recovery scorecard in Food Forecast displays the meal gap along economic and built environment data and allows you to monitor long-term recovery to continue to support those communities with needs. With Food Forecast, communities can plan and take action to reduce the human suffering caused by going without food after a disaster. We have 673 coastal counties in the US, and every one of them can use this to predict where post-disaster food insecurity might be an issue and take actions to reduce the doubling. I would like to acknowledge all the partners that have contributed to the development of this. And I'd like to conclude with connecting this work more directly to our campus. College students are a group that's highly impacted by food insecurity. Estimates range between 19 and 56% prevalence on campuses here in the US. So if you would like to support our campus Retriever Essentials and address food insecurity here on campus, please visit and see how you can donate. And they'll also be at the carnival on Saturday, so stop by. Thanks.
So mathematics is highly interdisciplinary, and it can be very entertaining. Can you believe that? It also has a lot of movies out there for people who have watched out that are very, have meaning beyond just that are focused on the math. Hidden Figures with Dorothy Vaughan was about the critical aspects of the 1960 space race. The Enigma Code in World War II, imitation game with Alan Turing as the focus. Theoretical Physics, The Theory of Everything, with Stephen Hawking. And they even did sports, Moneyball, where Billy Beane uses data-driven methods to assemble a competitive baseball team on a limited budget. That may be useful in the near future. But bottom line, math and science play a pivotal role in the shaping of our understanding of the universe. And today we'll hear all about the applications at the intersection of biology and mathematics. And it's my privilege to introduce Dr. Brad Piercy. He's a professor in the Mathematics and Statistics Department of Affiliate Faculty in Biological Sciences. He graduated with a PhD in mathematics from the University of Utah. He was a Phi Beta Vigor postdoc in the Computational Applied Mathematics Department at Rice University. He was a research fellow in the Laboratory of Biological Modeling at NIH. He uses dynamical systems to model systems as varied as cardiac ischemia, calcium propagation in neuronal dendrites, desynchronization in beta cell networks, and clustered cell migration, among other things. His work is at the interface of mathematics and biology and values research and training at the interdisciplinary interface. When biology speaks, a story of interdisciplinary discovery. That's his talk.
Thanks, Dean LaCourse, for the introduction, and of course, Vice President Steiner for this engaging opportunity. I'm going to talk to you today about 4 historically important mathematical models that reflect a biological phenomenon. And then I'm going to continue on with the work that I do in terms of collaboration involving the migration of clustered cells in a Drosophila fruit fly. So in 1926, Vito Volterra was an Italian mathematician, wrote a paper with his son-in-law, Umberto D'Ancona. And Umberto is a marine biologist, and he noticed in a local fish market that there were periodic amounts of predatory fish versus prey fish in the market. And so he was wondering, well, what might this cause this situation? And so he got together with his father-in-law, and they decided to, using some of the early work from Lotka, to write down mathematical models that represented the biological phenomenon. And were able to write down equations that captured some of the behavior. And lo and behold, these equations captured this periodic behavior of the prey and the predator. All right? And so once this abstraction was derived, then you can apply this to a variety of different scenarios. So land animals, insects, a variety of different contexts. Right? And so, in fact, most of the work on food webs and interspecies interactions are derived from this early model. In 1927, Anderson McKendrick, who is a biochemist but interested in mathematical phenomenon, got together with William Kermack in deciding to study the disease progression, and they came up with the susceptible, infected, and recovered model of disease. And so in this situation, we have sort of susceptible population interacting with infected populations at, say, a rate beta. And then you have the recovery of infected population, say, gamma. And so the ratio of this infection to recovery represents an R0. And with an R0 value that is much greater than 1, then you get a highly infectious situation. In the spring of 2020, I was beginning to teach my biomath class. And the first day of class, I decided to put up a slide that represented an emerging disease that was coming out of Wuhan. They're calling it COVID-19. A few hundred examples, one over there in Seattle popping up. Thought it'd be a good thing to keep an eye on. So it goes without saying that mathematical representations of disease spread are extremely important in today's world. 1952, Alan Hodgkin and Andrew Huxley, both physician and biophysicists, got together and studied the potential in nerve cells. And so they were able to find that a mathematical expression to capture this motion of potential through the nerve cell, and importantly, they were able to capture the gating of ion channels. So ions would be able to flow through into the cell and depolarize the neuron, and then potassium gates would open and potassium ions would flow out and repolarize the neuron. So combined, they would form an action potential. This allows for the potential to go along axons and for information to travel along cells, right? So, and this, I should say, they won the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 1963 and forms the basis of basically all of the interactions in brain science, and even artificial intelligence is oriented in those modeling early days. So in 1970, Evelyn Keller and Lee Siegel, Evelyn Keller is a physiologist and Lee Siegel is a mathematician, they decided to look at amoeboid movement, and amoeboid movement in response to chemical signals. And so what they were able to find was they had, or they would track was they had a population of chemical secreted by cells, say V, and then the cells themselves would respond to this chemical, and they would move up chemical gradients, right? And so what they would find then you would find these fruiting bodies in response to these chemical gradients. And so this is a mathematical framework that captures a lot of interesting work in development, in wound healing, in cancer metastasis, and it actually feeds into the collaborative work that I began in the last few years. So in 2008, I joined UMBC, and shortly thereafter, we got a training grant to study, to help undergraduates be trained at the interdisciplinary interface of mathematics and biology. And in this process, I was able to meet fellow newbie, Michelle Stars-Gaiano, developmental biologist who had a fantastic model system, still has the fantastic model system, of the Drosophila fruit fly egg chamber. And in this process of certain stages in this development, you find a group of cells that cluster at the anterior end. They make their way through the nurse cells to the oocyte on the other end and continue the developmental process. Now, in the process of moving, they sense these chemicals that are throughout the system, much like you might sense the aroma from a bakery with your nose and follow it to that space. So lots of questions arise with this movie. Biological and even mathematical questions can arise with this. So one of them was, okay, how do these cells originate at the anterior end? And so Michelle had a graduate student, Lathina Manning, who was able to take this football-shaped egg chamber and basically turn it on its end and look at the top down to see sort of the activation pattern of the cells. And with the secretion starting at the middle, you might initially think that, well, sort of the closest neighbors might be the ones that activate. And there are some of that, but there are quite a few different structures as well. Some asymmetries, some gaps. The question is, well, maybe why is that happening? Well, so we developed a mathematical model to sort of test the idea that maybe underneath this layer, there's a microenvironment. There's a sort of a biasing that happens with the signal that then leads to these different activation patterns. And lo and behold, with this mathematical model, we were able to show and reproduce all of these different activation patterns that the experimentalists were able to see, right, by changing a couple of different geometric features of the microenvironment. So another question might be, okay, how can we represent the migration of the cluster itself? Well, so we take advantage of agent-based modeling in this particular case, and we take these agents and we put in some basic forces, some repulsion, some adhesion between the agents. And then we say, okay, so maybe there's a little stochastic force, and maybe most importantly, we have this response to chemoattractants, right? And so we put these agents together in both the clusters and in larger nurse cells, and we are able to show that, indeed, we can get, with just these basic forces, a migration through the egg chamber, right? So adhesion over adhesion, fist over fist, like a rock climber making its way through the rocks, right? So along this pathway, again, there's this chemoattractant that's involved. But the environment is very challenging in the sense that experiments are very difficult to see the distribution of the chemicals in this context. And so nextly, we took a look at this main axis, this main pathway of migration, and we hypothesized that, okay, there's some gaps in between the nurse cells along this pathway. And we were able to sort of suggest that, well, the trajectory of the cluster as it makes its way through with varied speeds is due to this underlying geometric formation. And so we created a model that captured this, and we're indeed able to show that there's variation in speed, right? But then once you have this model, you want to test it, right? You want to test the prediction. So we increase the chemoattractant, and we increase the distribution of chemoattractant in that space, and we show that, well, the cluster actually counterintuitively slows down in that process. Well, then we say, okay, well, what happens if we then open that gap back up? If we increase the gap and we decrease the distribution a little bit, well, we in fact recreate the speed of the original situation. And so we can do this with the model. That's great. We can do that with the model. But can we do that with the experiment? And indeed, we were able to reproduce that experiment by overexpressing chemoattractant in the native egg chamber, and also do a mutation where we actually increase the space between nurse cells. And it reproduces the same sort of effect. We have a slowing down of the migration, followed by a rescue with the mutation. So lastly, most recently, we've been looking at a phase field model framework to look at how our cells are interacting. And so we have an individual cell that acts as a phase. So we have a 1 when we're inside the phase, or 0 outside of the phase. And what that allows us to do is that have multiple phases interacting, multiple cells, and it puts us into a partial differential equation framework, which allows us to attack this problem a little more efficiently. But we need an additional term in our migration, which is this a brand new novel term, tangential interface migration force, which is able to capture this rock climbing effect of clusters of cells making their way through nurse cells. This model then provides us with a framework to be able to study more migration questions, including multiple chemoattractants at the same time. Right? So the historical examples that I shared, the recent work that we've been doing, are all due to interdisciplinary collaboration, right? And so I'm actually super excited to say that we've just been, with the donation from the CNMS Dean to start it up, we're starting a Center for Integrated Mathematical and Biological Sciences Research and Education. So I'm happy to talk about anybody about that afterwards. Thank you.
All right, keeping with the movie theme. I keep on telling Carl these should have themes. So, you know how hard I have to work to find themes? But this one here is, the title just lent itself to it. It's Grit Under Pressure, right? And it's all about survival movies that are out there. And so whether you're on a planet like The Martian, Castaway on an Island, or Apollo 13, it's about human ingenuity, and it's about hope, and it's about people working together to survive and to keep things going. But I think the movie that really summed it up the best for me, looking at this talk and what's going on, is Jurassic Park, right? They make a bunch of dinosaurs, they clone them, the science is really not there, but it's still entertaining. And these dinosaurs are able to, they're not supposed to survive because they built in a kill switch. They need to have lysine, right? And so the only way they were going to survive is if they were provided with supplements, right? So they have to take their one-a-days so they can stay alive. And it's called the lysine contingency. But we know the dinosaurs survived because they made like 6 more sequels, right? So it didn't work. And that's because they ended up eating lysine-rich food like chickens. That's in case you need to know that. Or soya beans. And the carnivores eat the animals, the herbivores, and they continue. But the statement that really sums up the novel and ties to the second part about how life adapts to oxygen deprivation really is in the novel by Michael Crichton, when Malcolm says, because the history of evolution is that life escapes all barriers. Life breaks free. Life expands to new territories, painfully, perhaps even dangerously, but life finds a way, right? And that's what we're going to see next, I think. It's my privilege to introduce Dr. Rachel Brewster. As a professor in biological sciences, she received her bachelor's degree in biology from the University of Geneva in Switzerland and went on to pursue her doctoral studies in developmental neurobiology at the University of Michigan, earning her PhD in 1996. She then completed a postdoctoral training at the New York University Skirball Institute for Biomolecular Medicine and the Carnegie Institution for Science in Baltimore, where she continued to investigate brain development. In 2004, she joined the Department of Biological Sciences at UMBC. Her early research focused on the mechanisms underlying formation of the neural tube, the embryonic structure that gives rise to the brain and the spinal cord. With tenure, she launched a new research direction centered on how the nervous system and other tissues adapt to environmental stress with a focus on protection from low oxygen. Grit under pressure, how life adapts to oxygen deprivation.
Good evening. I don't know how many of you have ever attempted to hold your breath for a minute or more. Those of you who have, I think you would agree with me that it is extremely unpleasant. And that is because our bodies rely on oxygen to survive. Under optimal conditions, the level of oxygen in the environment equals the demand of oxygen from the cells in our body. Those are shown by those blue arrows. So the oxygen enters our cells and into these little factories called mitochondria that can use this oxygen to generate energy in the form of ATP. And this ATP is what fuels everything that we do, our muscle contractions, our ability to signal to our different cells in our brain. And so it's absolutely essential. And given that oxygen is so important, when there is an imbalance between the amount of oxygen available, shown by fewer oxygen molecules there, but the demand of oxygen remains high, this causes a crisis in the cell, where essentially the cell cannot produce enough ATP to power what we need to do. And oxygen that is missing in the environment might be one cause, but in addition, there are cells and tissues in our body that may simply not get enough oxygen delivery to operate at an optimal level. And so this can lead to a variety of diseases, either causing these diseases or exacerbating these diseases because there simply is not enough energy to function. So despite this, there are many organisms that have found a way to adapt to low oxygen. And I'm showing them here. They're called hypoxia-tolerant organisms. And one of these organisms that my lab studies is called the zebrafish. The zebrafish is remarkable in the sense that it can survive for up to 50 hours in complete absence of oxygen. And so it's a great model for trying to understand how nature can do without this essential element. So while all the organisms that I showed you there are hypoxia tolerant, they do it different ways. But there are also some conserved mechanisms, meaning mechanisms that occur across all of these organisms. And those are the molecules that my lab is particularly interested in identifying because if we also possess them, that means that if we understand how they work, we may be able to modulate them to mitigate hypoxic injury. So to give you an example of such a conserved molecule, I'm showing you here the hypoxia-inducible factor called HIF-1 alpha in blue. It's a molecule that is extremely unstable under normal oxygen conditions. It gets tagged, and that causes it to be degraded in essentially the cell's garbage disposal, which is called the proteasome. However, when oxygen is low, these tags are removed, and the level of HIF-1 alpha can accumulate. And what happens next is that these molecules can enable other molecules that have important adaptive functions to be expressed. For example, vascular growth factors increase, enabling more blood vessels to be formed. More red blood cells are also generated. And there are other molecules that enable the cell to make energy in a mitochondria-independent manner. So essentially, this all enables cells to do the best that they can with very little oxygen. And so this discovery was seminal because it was one of our first strong pieces of understanding of how essentially cells can adapt to a very harsh and changing environment. And it led to the Nobel Prize for these three scientists in physiology and medicine in 2019. And building on that work, there are currently now clinical trials for drugs that either activate or inhibit HIF-1 alpha to serve for treatment for anemia and cancer. So my laboratory is interested in identifying other molecules like HIF-1 alpha. And we are going back to these hypoxia-tolerant organisms because they are able to induce other kinds of responses that are probably more extreme and enable organisms to survive under extremely harsh conditions. These conditions are such that you have very little oxygen, but what these organisms can do is they can reduce the demand for oxygen, shown by that one little blue arrow there. And so what this means is that while the supply is low, the demand has also decreased, and the organism reaches a new state of stability. And it can function by preserving ATP. So in our attempt to discover molecules that might induce this state of arrest, if you will, we performed a screen with the expectation that any molecules that are important for survival will be upregulated under these very harsh conditions. And so we performed a genetic screen and identified a molecule that has a terrible name. I didn't choose it. It's called NMYC downstream regulated gene 1 alpha, NDRG1, and it's shown there in red. And this remarkable protein can associate to other proteins, the sodium potassium ATPase, which in subsequent slides I'm going to call NKA. This is an enzyme that uses a lot of energy to carry out its function. And so it's not at all optimal to keep this thing going when oxygen is low. And on the other side, NDRG1 can interact with other proteins or molecules that transport target proteins to various compartments of the cell. So what we have shown is that in low oxygen, the levels of lactate elevate, and NDRG1 can grab this pump and associate with trafficking proteins and deliver this pump again to the cell's garbage disposal. And we believe that this is a method by which cells can conserve energy under extreme situations. So I want to walk you through a few experiments that helped us to demonstrate this model. So the first thing we did is we wanted to determine where this molecule is expressed, NDRG1. And we found that it is in the kidney and the ionocytes. And these cells serve the common purpose of maintaining ion homeostasis. And this is a very energy-demanding process. So from there, we were wondering, what might this molecule be doing? And we decided to go through the database for zebrafish embryos and to find other molecules that might have a same spatial distribution. And we found the sodium potassium ATPase. They have remarkable similar distributions seen here with different labeling methods. And as I told you, this pump is very energy demanding because it has to pump sodium and potassium against their gradient. What we further demonstrated is that under low oxygen, the levels of NDRG1 are high, and NDRG1 binds to lactate, whose levels increase under low oxygen. NDRG1 can then bind to the sodium potassium ATPase pump and lead it to the cell's garbage can. So this is all very well and good, and it seems like there is an interesting correlation, which doesn't mean causation, between the association between these proteins and the degradation of the pump. So we believe that this is a method for the cell to, as I said, preserve energy. And the last experiment that I'm going to show you is one that actually demonstrated this more directly. We were able to get rid of this molecule, NDRG1, and we observed to our satisfaction that these fish looked perfectly normal. They grew to adulthood, they were fertile, but they died at a much higher rate than normal fish when exposed to low oxygen. So we then looked at the levels of sodium potassium ATPase in normal fish and fish that were lacking this protein, NDRG1. And what we saw is that the levels of NDRG1 go down over time in normal fish, but remain at a very high level in fish that are lacking NDRG1. So this led us, this is quantified here, wild type in the black line and the mutant in red. And so this led us to conclude that NDRG1 might be a molecule that can turn on a low power mode in the cell. And that in this low power mode, organisms and cells are able to endure quite a long period of oxygen deprivation. And so NDRG1 is a molecule that we also have. And we think that the only difference between fish and humans is how this molecule is regulated. So where my lab hopes to go in the future is to find a way to activate NDRG1 independently of low oxygen. Because with the ability to do so, we could enable cells to be protected when oxygen levels drop. So I know I'm a little bit over time, but I'm the last speaker, so I'll say one last thing. And that is that, help me dream here, I think that it would be possible in the future to take an organ that is waiting to be transplanted. That organ sees very little oxygen and sees no nutrients, so it's in crisis. What if we could induce in such an organ NDRG1 and enable this organ to have reduced cell damage because it is in this state of stasis? So that's where we hope to go in the future, and thank you very much for your attention.
Your clicker. So we started with GridX 2025, and we ended up with Grid Under Pressure. So there's sort of a circle of life right there. And you know, I promised you would learn something and you would be amazed. And isn't it something that all these things are UMBC alumni, UMBC students, UMBC faculty? This is all happening right here on this campus. So can I get another round of applause for everybody? Before I'm going to ask our president to join us up here and all of our speakers, I want to just do a quick shout out to just a very small number of people that really were important behind the scenes. One of them is, and I think they're out here, I don't know if we can get the lights up a little bit, Stanielle Bruce and Jess Wyatt, who really have been the incredible team over in alumni engagement. There you are. Wherever Jess is out here, there you are. And Jess has been sweating the entire homecoming, and we're not done yet. We're still in the beginning, so there's a lot more coming on. A very special shout out to Conchetta Argento, standing on the right there. You cannot even imagine all the things she's been sweating about for the last, well, month maybe, but even for the last week. So 3 quick shout outs. Where's Valerie? There you are. That was easy. And I wanted you to say a few words.
I can do that. First of all, let's give Carl a hand. Yeah. So if you know Carl, he has been talking to you about GridX for the last 11 months, right? For the last 11 months. Hey, Founding Four. Okay, let me just shout out my Founding Four, sit right here. Oh, so lovely to see you all. So, Carl, congratulations. I know he tries to make this look easy, but as he just said, it is not. And I am deeply appreciative for you putting on display the best of UMBC. Here's the trick. I've been here now. This is my 4th go-around. And every year I say, how's he going to top that one? And it just keeps getting better and better and better. And what it's really getting is different and different and different. Right. Because we have so much talent in our alumni base, and we have so much talent amongst our faculty. So, yes, you can clap for that. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. So I'm just going to say a few words about what inspired me, and I hope that this inspired. Do you feel inspired? Okay, good, because I sure feel inspired. So many wonderful things. So I'm going to start at the beginning here. As soon as I heard the title and I heard "The Future is Here," I had to sit still for a moment because I was in a meeting earlier today where people were debating what are we going to do with AI. It's here. And I love the premise that was used that we're going to do this wherever we end up. We're going to do it without fear, but we're going to do it with an eye towards safety. It's not whether or not you're not going to avoid it. You're going to do something with it, but the way that we're going to do that, I so appreciated Garji's talk. That was fantastic. And then it was a future kind of night because then I heard Zev said, well, the future is bright. And I thought, well, the future is here and the future is bright. But what I love that because, you know, the nanoscientist in me loved all of those nanoparticles and everything there. But my highlight there was when he said, I was dancing when I saw quantum dots. And I thought, can I see that dance right now? There, I love it. I love it. I love it. I thought I was the only one who danced in the lab. I'm very clear that I am not alone. But that dancing led to what I call real dancing. And I just want to acknowledge the students who danced. Victoria and India, would you all stand? By the way, I know you are graduating, and I always say students, you're forever my students. So that was fantastic, was it not? It was beautiful. It was beautiful. And as I sat there, I thought, how is it that Carl has weaved this story together so beautifully? Because the talk before that, I heard him say, he challenged us. Felipe challenged us. He said, I'm challenging you to dismantle the physical and attitudinal barriers. And then they danced. Like, that blew my mind, and I thought, there it is. It was just such a beautiful thing. I will also note, and I'll come back to this one in a moment, that Felipe said, you know, what do you do? How do you move in spaces that were never designed for you? I could just go home right now. Right? Every one of us can sit there and think, well, how have I moved in spaces that were never designed for me? Right? Or how do I think about people? Maybe I have moved in spaces that were designed for me. Now, how am I going to treat people who the space wasn't designed for them? I was inspired. And then I love I love interdisciplinary work, and we saw the interdisciplinary work here in the end of math. When does biology speak math except at UMBC? I mean, I just love that title. I love that title. But we also saw the transdisciplinary work, which was simply beautiful. Think about this: animation, music, poetry, biology, and wine. Right? I feel like that's so beautifully UMBC, because ultimately what I heard him say was, all of that is for the purpose of cultural exploration. Right? What length won't we go to? Right? All of that. And it was just so beautiful. What also was capturing for me with that is that you can't do transdisciplinary work if you don't have colleagues with open minds. Right? When somebody calls you and says, I want to put poetry in a bottle, let's go to coffee and talk about it. That takes an open mind. So I just thought that was beautiful. And I just want to reflect on the last few talks here for a second. there's not a GridX that I come to where people don't stand on this stage, brilliant folks, stand on this stage and talk about reducing human suffering. Not 1 year has passed. And so we heard it from everything from the diseases of cancer and thinking about people who need organ transplants to food insecurity, right? This is an institution where we do brilliant work before the public good. And so that is ever inspiring to me. So, you know, I hate to, where's Bill LaCourse? He's somewhere in the back. Yeah, I tease Bill because I tell you that Bill's the only person who's called me Val from day one. And I knew he was not going to come out here and stick to a script of any kind. He never does. But he said some words amongst all of the other things that really struck me. And I so appreciate the one word that he said that I think everybody needs at this moment, and I feel it tonight, and that is hope. Looking at what our faculty and staff and students do every day. So imagine all of that talent that you just saw engaging with our students in the classroom, in the dance studio, in the theater, in the lab, and all of that being translated into us having more open minds, more open hearts, and that's hopeful to me. So I hope that you enjoy Homecoming. What a way to launch this. Simply beautiful, Carl. Thank you so very much. Delighted to see all of you here. For those of you who are visiting back on campus, welcome back. And I'm going to tell you, I've been at many institutions, but nobody starts Homecoming like this. It's a UMBC thing to have a puppy parade, but to launch Homecoming with just the brilliance of our faculty and alums. So thank you all very much. Have a lovely evening.